So Jason, here we are. We've just had midterm elections. We are at November 15th, right?
I think so.
Right before Thanksgiving. I thought it'd be a good time to have a check-in, see where your head is at. You are how long into this journey now? You're 2.5 years?
Yeah, just about 2.5 years.
Yep.
Surprisingly.
And, you know, coming up to the end of the year, it's time to start thinking about year-end tax situation. We've just done an episode on taxes, you know, starting to think about how we're going to wrap up the fiscal year. I want to check in with you and see, you know, 2.5 years in, what are you thinking about right now? What's on your mind? What are your preoccupations?
For me, this represents about a year now since I went out on my own and you know, left the services of my financial advisors and started managing everything myself. And one of the things that has come up is, you know, according to my IPS, if you remember my investment policy statement, is it's rebalancing time. So
okay.
I do that in May and November.
Okay.
And so about a week ago, I started to spend probably way too much time thinking about what rebalancing would look like for this period. And maybe some of that's really obvious, right? Stocks are down a lot more. Bonds are still down, but not as much as equities. So obviously I'm probably a little high in bonds and a little low in equities. So I knew I had to do some selling. It's also the time where I have to refill my cash. So I try to keep about 2 years of cash, and that means that every 6 months when I do these rebalancings, that's the time to generate cash. And so
that's gotta
sounds
feel,
like
I'm just going to say that's got to feel weird right now with the market being where it's at.
Yeah.
We've both done a lot of reading on this.
Yeah.
And you're just executing the plan, right? The plan works. The plan works. You have to trust the plan, but I'm going to be honest. I'd probably delay it a little bit.
Well, you know, when we had people respond to some of our recent episodes, maybe it's the holding cash one or even more recently, and they were saying things like, well, that's, you know, one of the benefits of 2 years of cash is you can just kind of let it ride sometimes. And, you know, and that's it's kind of a common viewpoint, right? I mean, and some adherents to the bucket strategy follow that very guidance, like, well,
momentum.
You know, yeah, exactly. I don't have to sell the asset that's high or, you know, buy the asset that's low. I can kind of let that cash kind of run down a bit and then evaluate over time. And I have tried to, since our conversation with Karsten, really get away from anything that feels like market timing. And, you know, not to a fault. I don't think I'm over analyzing this thing, but, you know, I put some rules in place. And so we hit the time to rebalance, we hit the time to generate cash. So I, you know, said, I am doing both of these things. And so I started spreadsheeting because that's what I do, right? You know, we made that rebalancing tool available earlier this year, and that came out of something that I have myself. I know you're aware of it. And I just started looking at what's out of range, what's in range. And, you know, honestly, Eric, there wasn't a lot that I had to move around. We're talking about, you know, a few percent here or there to get things on target.
I was going to say stocks and bonds are, I mean, they're both down this year, right?
Not down as bad. I mean, let's rewind a week. We've had a pretty good week.
No, I know, but
knock on wood.
Aren't your bands like plus or minus 20%?
They are, but I have to generate cash anyway.
Yeah, right.
So why not use this opportunity to do that? Because again, I need cash. And we'll come back to cash, because cash also means dealing with treasuries, right? And it's not all cash. And I've followed some, you know, reasonable advice out there on what to do. I'm not just holding a big bucket of coins, I promise. But the thing I want to share with you is that I found this whole exercise a little more worrisome than I thought I would. Not because it was hard. It's not technically difficult. I know how to buy and sell in my accounts. And particularly if you're talking about doing it in a tax-deferred account like my traditional IRA, I'm not worrying about taxes in that case, but I do have to do some of this work in my taxable account because I'm generating cash. So I have to think about taxes, which means thinking about tax lots. I'm thinking about loss harvesting, what I've already generated for losses, and do I want to take any gains and do things that are out of whack? And, you know, for my brain, that makes me measure 10 times before I cut once. And I probably did way more spreadsheeting than I needed to, but when I got to the end, I will admit I still paused. It kind of reminds me of when you were talking about pausing when you're changing your allocation. to 70-30 way back when.
Oh, I know that feeling, man.
I don't want to hit the button, especially on ETFs.
Oh yeah, it's done.
As soon as I hit that button, that sale's going through or that buy's going through. A couple of them are mutual funds, so I'll freely admit that, given some of the sizes of positions I was moving around, I was like, all right, I'll just kind of check in, hour before market close and see how things are going.
I mean, this just says it all, man.
No, I did it.
Because they trade once a day at market close.
Yes, that's right.
For people who aren't aware that mutual funds trade differently than ETFs. ETFs trade the moment you hit the sell button, right? But
that's right.
Or buy button.
Yes. As long as someone wants your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, but for generally for the index funds that we're holding, there's pretty high market volume, especially now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess what I was surprised by, Eric, was that I was a little more anxious than maybe I should be. I think that was just because it was the first time.
Sure.
Everything was fine. I went in the next day, and when I had all my positions settled and the spreadsheet was where it was supposed to be, I had the cash I was supposed to have. All right. So everything's fine. But, I would say it felt good on net, but, being out the other side. I had the cash I wanted to. Of course, it just created another problem about what am I going to keep in real cash versus am I going to buy treasuries? And we could talk about that, but the rebalancing
doing some bond ladders or what?
No, nothing so complicated, to be honest with you.
But yeah, we're talking about 6 months of cash. So you basically burn through 6 months of cash, or is it more?
Yeah, no. The burn is going the way it's supposed to. Okay. I haven't had to withdraw anything beyond my budgeted monthly expenses.
So you're on budget. You're not under budget. You're not over budget.
Yeah,
you're right on it. Okay, so every 6 months. Okay, all right.
Yeah. So
respect, man.
Yeah, it was like I say, it went okay in the end, but I definitely spent more hours on it than I'm sure I will ever again in the future.
Yeah, I did some loss harvesting recently, and there was there's some pretty big numbers in those accounts, and I was like, okay, is this the right lot? And of course, if you're doing loss harvesting, you got to set yourself up 30 days in advance, and you got to make sure you're not buying the funds that you're going to try to loss harvest and all those things. And I remember feeling a similar level of anxiety, like, okay, I want to do this correctly, but for you, it's a little more permanent, man. Just cashing in the chips.
Yeah, I try not to think about it, with that lens on the world, but I do. I freely admit. But I have the plan. I trust in the plan. I'm investing for the long term. I think I'm doing a good job of that. I didn't find myself second guessing if this is an exercise I should be doing. I didn't feel any real temptation to just let it ride and go another 6 months, which would put me at a year of cash by the time I get to May remaining. Instead, I chose to refill to the level that I said I would.
I don't think I would have had the fortitude to do that, man. I would have let it ride.
I don't know, man. We'll see. When two sides of Phi gets to that point, we will remember this episode.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
Sure.
I was going to say, you won't be taking my calls by then.
That's probably untrue. I really don't have that many friends.
Oh man, ouch. Okay.
I kid. Yeah. But if you want to talk about spending active energy on something truly boring, that would be the amount of time I have been thinking about treasury bills for the last few weeks.
I feel sorry for you.
It's embarrassing. But, I did take action, right? Because we had some people write in and they say, hey, when we were talking about holding cash, and we did 2 episodes on that, why are you holding 2 years of cash literally in cash, like a money market or a Southern savings account? And I said,
knew that was going great on you, man. I knew it.
I know. And they're right. And I told you this, right? I was thinking about, doing, treasury bill laddering or other things like that. And then, of course, rates continue to only get better and better. And I was like, okay, now I'm just being dumb. Yep. This isn't about seeking a few basis points. And so, I did some modeling, and then, of course, I did some more modeling. And this goes back a couple weeks now. I'm like, this is just silly. I'm just going to take a chunk of this and buy some 6-month T-bills and be done with it. And they're going to make whatever, I think the yield was 4.6% or something at that time. So I was like, all right, so that's done. And then I looked at my current cash reserves and then what was going to come with this rebalancing. I was like, well, I still kind of have like a year and a half of cash. That's probably still too much. What if and I think you actually even suggested this, Eric, quite a while ago. Why don't you put half of it in treasury bills? And so then I made another buy of even more 6-month bills 2 weeks later, and the yield was almost the same, still around 4.5%. And I did that. And I still have a little bit left of cash before I hit that 1 year that I was targeting. And so I'll see what the yields look like in the next release over this week or next week when they're announced. And the ones I'm looking at are announced every Thursday. These are 13, 26-week T-bills pretty much. I'm not interested in going longer than that. The yield curve is still what it is. Doesn't make sense to me right now, personal decision. But pretty soon, in other words, I'll have a year of cash in 3 tranches of T-bills from at most 6 months, and maybe there'll be a 3-month in there depending upon what the next set looks like.
Now you're only losing like 3.5%, 4%.
Wow! Now it feels good to burn slightly less cash. But
it's smart. That's like a low, obviously no risk move almost, right? I mean,
yeah, but I'll be honest, Ark, I did spend some time thinking about, well, what's the right amount to leave liquid? Because yes, I know I can sell these T-bills on the secondary market. I'm not locked in like a CD where they have the penalty concept, but still, I want to keep things easy. And, I want at least 6 months of funding to fund expenses for 6 months, because we're talking about 6-month T-bills, right? But also I'm thinking like, well, what if something else happens where I need access to cash? Yes, I have credit cards. Yes, I could borrow against the house, but I don't know, a year felt right. So maybe half of it liquid, half of it in T-bills, and that's where I am right now.
I mean, you could just set these up as rolling ladders and then just always just refill.
That's right.
Whatever you felt comfortable keeping, that's the part that you're going to be refilling, right? You're going to spend
exactly. I kept auto roll off for now.
Oh, you did. So did you buy these right in Fidelity? Because they have a nice little tool.
I did. So I am buying these as new issues. There's been a couple posts about this lately. I think the one I've seen posted most often is by Harry Sitt, who is somebody I follow anyway. I think it's the Finance Buff. Is that right? The
Finance
name of
Buff.
his blog.
Yeah.
I saw this post. It got me thinking. And so, pretty much just anyone who wants to know, I'll link this in the show notes. Anyone who wants to know how to buy new issue treasuries from your brokerage. He actually has all the main 3 or 4 brokerages in there. It's very simple. I didn't do any secondary market buying. I also didn't use Treasury Direct. Coincidentally, right when I started doing this is when the Treasury Direct website started collapsing during all the people buying I-bonds before October 30th.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Or 31st. So yeah. But
I like his posts. I mean, he actually has some real good posts on like cash buckets and not like selling your portfolio and things like that. I mean, it's well written and it's smart.
I think so.
Yeah. And I don't think he has a cash bucket, does he?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. That's good. I like Fidelity's tool for buying these things. Vanguard's is a little less ideal. But you don't have to pay a spread on them. I mean, you can buy these things from Vanguard and Fidelity.
That's right. If you buy them as new issue, you don't pay. You don't have to deal with the bid-ask spread if you're buying them on the secondary market, which you can also do from all those brokerages as well. But that's not what I chose to do. Right.
No, I wasn't interested in paying. I looked into this a little bit, but I don't think it makes sense for someone in my position necessarily still accumulating. But yeah, interesting.
You may recall, Eric, that at the beginning of this year, I mentioned I wasn't going to increase my withdrawal rate for inflation, right? Most models assume you increase your withdrawal rate based on inflation. We have a big inflationary year this year. I elected not to. I think part of that is just my mental space around sequence of return risk and being conservative. But the other part is, Lori and I do have that kind of fun job 1 day a week. And we have a little money coming in from that. And so, the kind of way I felt about it was there's no need to push it if we're basically meeting our expenses with the withdrawal rate. But what I've noticed is, especially over the last 6 months, maybe there's some lagging effects here coming on the types of things we purchase. I've noticed we're dipping out of our budgeted monthly withdrawal rate into some of these other pots of money, sinking funds a little more often. And so one thing I did decide last week is that I'm going to increase my withdrawal rate come January. So I've already changed my scheduled transfer because I budget a month ahead. I've increased my withdrawal rate by 6% for next year. And yes, that's still below inflation. So I feel good about that.
Well, that's the current I-bond rate, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That's a little over 6%. No, actually, I just did it based on looking at my actuals and my, actual expenses versus my withdrawal rate. I'm like, 6% feels about right. And so I am increasing it. I've set my auto withdrawal, my auto transfer from my brokerage to do that. It kind of came at a good time because Karsten has written a couple of posts recently. I think we might have even talked about them on the show before, about his modified CAPE ratio that he came up with, and then he updated the safe withdrawal rate toolbox where you could choose that as an option if you were interested in a variable CAPE adjusted withdrawal rate plan. And so I rebuilt my model using that, and now I kind of like that, I've decided. And so even though I'm not changing my withdrawal rate other than this inflation adjustment, I now am using that CAPE adjusted withdrawal rate as a ceiling. And so I'm, monthly I'm updating it because he puts out, he has a CSV file that he has on his Google Drive where he updates his modified CAPE ratio. And it's just now part of my monthly little budget exercise where I look at that new CAPE ratio. I think it was 23 as of a couple days ago, and just put it in the tool. And I have a new withdrawal rate ceiling, and I'm staying below that. But at least now it's like making me cognizant of it on a regular basis. So for anyone who commented previously, hey, flat withdrawal rate, maybe not the best strategy. And my response was always, yeah, but I'm way below what the model says I can withdraw. Don't worry about me. Now, at least I feel like I have another piece of data that I'm looking at. I kind of enjoy it, honestly, me overthinking things.
What were you spending more on?
I think like many people, I'm finding that shopping, especially like groceries, are higher.
Busted. Are you eating meat again?
No. and our daughter isn't even requesting that meat be purchased for her as the carnivore.
You always
in
give
the
me
family.
crap.
Well, you told me. I mean, Laura said how much her groceries are, and I was like, hey, they're a lot more than ours. But
they're a lot lower now that one of our kids is off at school. I'll tell you.
Yeah, I was gonna say you had 2 teenage boys. That's one of whom is both actually play sports. So I mean, they could probably eat a lot.
Yep, but yeah.
Some categories went up.
Those costs have shifted elsewhere. I'll say that.
Yeah.
The college costs, not like the meal plan is free, but
no, for sure. I mean, I think some of our discretionary funding is a little up, and that also reflects price increases. Kind of dining out and things like that. Just, those expenses have gone up a little bit. So just kind of when I look at where things are going out, because, I do have coarser buckets now in my budget. Again, we've talked about this before. I'm not doing the minutia level, but I can see where things are falling out between, utility bills and the mortgage and food shopping and stuff.
Cool, man. Wow.
So there's that.
Up in the rate.
I can. I mean, if you want, I can throw something a little wilder at you. It's not.
Yeah, throw something wilder at me, man. That's...
All right. So, so we didn't talk about.
I thought you were going to say, oh, I up in my rate. I'm going to like 8%. I'm taking 10% or something. No, I don't know, something wild. So but you're like, oh, I went a little less than inflation.
Yeah.
You're wild,
right.
man.
I'm boring.
You're a wild man. Go for it.
All right. So we didn't talk about what we were going to raise in this episode. It was kind of a, point in time type episode.
Right.
And, so the one thing that is unusual about the last couple weeks requires a little bit of backstory. I think about a year ago, I started thinking like, it would be kind of nice to be even better educated about the topics that you and I talk about every week, and that I certainly think about a lot more now post RE than I did before. And I was like looking at CFP courses, right, Certified Financial Planner courses, and I was like, maybe one day I'll take one of those, even just for my own edification. And I never did that because I'm like, well, that's a huge commitment. It's a lot of expense of money, but also time to do that. And if I don't want to practice as a CFP, maybe that's a silly use of money. And so I never really did anything with that. I just kind of continued to follow the same resources I always do. But honestly, I don't remember what kind of teed it up again, but about a week ago, I started thinking, yeah, maybe I should do that. And I started looking at CFP courses and reading Michael Kitsis's articles about that, the different resources that are available for study prep and for courses. And I got kind of deep on that again. And at some point, I had a different idea. And I was like, you know what? There are certifications that are a lot lighter touch than a CFP, which is a pretty heavy one, not quite CFA, but it's up there. And I stumbled on the Series 65, which is the Uniform Investment Advisor Law Exam. And that is, if you didn't know, kind of the minimum qualifications that are required in pretty much every state to practice as a investment advisor or an investment advisor representative. And I started looking into those courses and the content, and I was like, this seems really tractable. it's still a bunch of work. There's still an exam at the end of it if I choose to go forward. But like, if we're talking about spending like a few $100 at most and getting, some really good documents, kind of put me in the headspace of thinking like somebody who does this for a job, then that would tell me if I was really interested in this or not, or if it's something that's just like, oh, this is some more fun, financial education for me. And so about a week ago, I purchased a course, got the Kaplan course that a lot of people use from my own research. And I've been diligently doing it every day, spending 2 to 3 hours a day doing the reading, doing the exercises. I really like it. I have no idea what I'll do with it, if it'll just be for me or if I do something else. But kind of where I landed talking to Lori about this was, this is very low amount of money spent. And in the worst case, I gain information, gain knowledge. And in the best case, maybe it tells me there's something else I want to do with some of my time. So, yeah, that's what I've been up to. And, just figured I would share that with you.
I thought you were going to say you were taking an editing course, and then I could make you do the editing for the whole show.
I know damn well that there's no course I can take that is going to be a substitute for the last 8 or 9 years you've spent editing YouTube or your own channel. And now 2 Sides of Five.
All right, so you're not taking an editing course. I thought that was going to be the surprise.
I'm not.
Oh, damn it. All right.
I do like taking courses, and maybe someday I'll take a Final Cut Pro class.
Yeah. That's cool, man. That's nice.
Yeah.
It seems like you like doing those little exam related courses. You took the Part 107 exam, right? For your drone flying. Yep. Nice. It brings up a larger question for me, which I pulled this. So you didn't know this was coming, but I did read this comment, and it was on the video where I talk about my kind of changing my FI date. So this is not the protagonist says, I'm less worried about date. I have a plan, but there's a plus or minus component to it. I'm more worried about what happens after. It will be a vacation for the first 6 months, maybe a year, but eventually I'm going to have to find some meaning and purpose for the fingers crossed 30 or more years of retirement ahead of me. It sounds easy, but I've witnessed others crash and crash hard. Anger, frustration, bitterness, and scariest of all, sudden accelerated aging. I'm focused less on the actual day of transition and more worried about all that time afterwards. I want to love every minute of it, but it still frightens me. And I wanted to frame this question up for you because I see that kind of spoke to me in a way that I hadn't really thought about before. And that is, you have this huge space in front of you of opportunity. And I was wondering, in the 2.5 years that you've been there, do you feel, I know initially you were feeling like you had to fill every moment, but now I know you're going, like, now you're going to take this course and you want to do that because it's filling up your time and it's of interest to you. But like, do you ever worry that you're going to be like hopping from thing to thing to thing, or does it just feel like nice? I don't know.
Yeah, it's the latter. And I think a lot of this is going to be how people are wired. Like I was recently thinking about something I used to say. I don't think I've said it in years, but I don't know if I was in college or something. I was chatting with a friend, and someone said, if you had infinite money, or you had wealth beyond means, what would you do with your time? And I used to joke like, I'd become some kind of polymath. Like I'd go back to school and just keep studying different areas and trying different things, because that's how I'm wired. Like I want to know more about how stuff works. When I get an idea, I want to chase it down. And I've become only increasingly comfortable with the idea that whether it's a hobby or something more substantial, I will often like grab onto something, get really excited about it for months to a year or more, and then set it aside. And maybe I come back to it, and I have with many interests in my life, and others I've set down and maybe to never return. Yeah. And I'm totally okay with that.
How do you speak to somebody who has those fears and concerns that if they're not wanting to be a polymath?
Yeah. I think it makes me want to dig in and find out kind of how they're wired, and, how do they think about free time now? And, with, asking them the question of, like I just said, okay, well, boom, you're retired, and not only you're retired, you're fat fire. You don't have to think about money. Like, how do you spend that time? I think somebody faced with that it's gonna tell you a lot the way they answer that question. Because even with infinite resources, and I'm by no means of infinite resources, I can't just, go buy a first class ticket to anywhere in the world and, just keep doing that, week after week. That's not how my budget is set up. But it doesn't sound attractive to me to stay idle at this point in time. You're right. I don't feel the urge to fill every minute anymore, but I do love having the idea that I can wake up and decide to do something that day and, on my own when I have free time outside of obligations. And I'd want to understand if that person can see themselves like that, or if in fact they are the type where they really need a lot more focus and to think about kind of longer term initiatives and projects that they really need to put time in and build a skill set and keep doing more with it. I think people really do need to think about this. I'm not saying you can at 23 years old know what the answer to that will be when you're 40 or 45 or 50, but I think it's something that is important to think about and know who you are and see really how much work you should or need, I should say, how much work you need to put into that or not. It's not really a great answer, Eric, but I think it begs more questions for me. Like, I feel like you need to understand how somebody, how their brain works.
Well, I was wondering if you could articulate just how much white space you have.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, because
it
is a little bit, if you're someone who is busy working all the time and you're running from meeting to meeting, your whole life is this, and all of a sudden that goes away, that can be pretty disarming. And it's more than just, 6 months on the beach and chilling out. It's that continuum of space until you're no longer here. And I don't know how it's a big space to fill.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a really big space, honestly. And I mean, just to try to do this off the top of my head, I wake up pretty early, right? I'm up no later than 5 a.m. and I'm in bed by 10 p.m. So that already tells you how many hours you got to fill. That's quick math. What's that, 17 hours? So it's a lot. So you got to fill that time. Well, you don't have to fill it, but that's the time available to you. And so, when I think about my day, most days I don't have something like this that's going to take, let's call it 90 minutes of my day. But, I've got hobby or, passion project associated time every day. Maybe for this show, there's an hour or 2 hours, a couple of days a week, something like that. There's this, I've got some other interests. I have a homebrew club. Maybe that takes 90 minutes every couple of weeks, and then I have, obligations around the house, right? We all have chores or things we need to take care of, cooking, things like that. But when you add up all that time, doing the quick math, that's not a lot per day. So, you're talking about, 3-4 hours a day that's kind of spoken for by stuff you simply have to do. And of course there's, ebbs and flows here and there, appointments and things like that. So there really is a giant piece of every day that you can spend how you want. And even if you subtract, exercise and all these kind of things that, you should be doing and that you most of us want to do more of once we stop working so many hours, there's still a lot of time to fill. Yeah. And that is a scary idea for a lot of people. I look at it completely as opportunity. And I honestly love having that time. I think that's why I'm so, protective of it now when people try to take time away from me. And I'm still learning, honestly, Eric, how not to have such a visceral response from people wanting to decide how I spend my time.
But it also, it makes you look forward to, like, something like, I think about the Zoom call that we had with our regular friend group there from high school, right?
That's fair.
Like, and if it didn't happen, it's like,
I think you're right about that.
There's disappointment there, because it's like, okay, well, I've chosen these few things, and if one of them doesn't happen, then it's more disappointing or jarring than if it is for someone like me. It's like, well, that's one of 48 things that I had scheduled. You know what I mean?
I think that's a really interesting idea. And I don't think you've ever articulated it in those words to me, but you're clearly right. If things don't happen first of all, I should also say I'm not somebody who deals with, unexpected change very well. Fair. I'm guilty of reacting poorly to that, even though in my work life, it was like a guarantee every day, like it is for everybody. Yeah. In my personal life, I've never been amazing at dealing with unexpected change. And so
Ditto.
I think you're right. When you do have very few kind of, scheduled things that you look forward to, if one of them changes, I disappointment is real. And maybe some of that is especially relating to friends. I still don't have a gigantic friend network here in my new town. Obviously we had lockdown and all those things that kind of slowed down that kind of progress. It's gotten better, but still, you're right.
I mean, that's a concern for me in the sense that, and I'm thinking about this more and more because I have a different schedule than most working people. I mean, I can self-direct for the most part, unless I have a day full of meetings or whatever. But, the overlap time with your other friends who are working, who are, generally your age, it's more limited, right? I mean, you have all this white space and free time. And I don't mean free time disparagingly. I just mean
I know what you mean.
You can self-direct.
Unscheduled time.
Yeah. Whereas, people who that are still working a 9 to 5, that becomes weekends, and weekends get packed with going to the grocery store and kids events and whatever else it may be. And I think as we get older, those things start to change. Naturally, we're in a different season of life when we enter our 50s, and maybe our friends' kids are in college, but nonetheless, the overlapping time with people a similar age that's a little scary to me. Like, not only do you have all this free time, but then it's not time that overlaps with people in your similar age or friend group.
No, you're right. And I'll be honest, and if it kind of that it rings home in really silly ways sometimes. And for example, if I have I'm watching something or reading something and I want to send it, as a text to somebody, like, sometimes I'm a little disappointed that I can't get that like immediate reaction because, by the way, people are busy, and I am texting you less these days because you're busy. So maybe you're not on the receiving end as much as you used to be, but there are people who I text, right? I've been rewatching the Star Wars sequels in the morning. Great example of, you might say wasting time in the morning, but it's something I'm really enjoying. And, little nuggets will pop up and I'm like, oh, I want to send this to this friend, or maybe it's you, I know a lot of people deep in the Star Wars nerdery, and, they don't always write back right away because guess what? They're getting their kids ready for school, or they're already in their first work meeting. And so it's kind of a silly example, but it is a reality that people are on different schedules than me. And certainly in my friend group, I don't know very many people who have done this.
Yeah, no, I feel that sometimes, and I feel like I'll get a text from you and I'll be in a meeting or whatever. And, I can imagine what that must feel like on the other end. No, seriously, because
don't feel guilty. By the way, you should never.
No, it also raised this question for me, Jay. Like, percentage of time, and you may not be able to articulate this, but like, you've done this long enough now. How much time are you spending on hobbies versus like project? Like, do you distinguish between hobbies and projects, or like this course? I imagine is like, I don't know. How do you view that? And like relaxing, like, do you have relaxing time? Do you think of vacation time, or how do you kind of containerize those things? Because that's how I think about my life.
I think my purest relaxation time is pretty easy to categorize because I wake up hours before the rest of my family. That's my best time. And it's time where I need to be quiet anyway. I can't be like banging around the house. I don't have a studio like you, and our bedrooms are downstairs. So anything going on upstairs, people will be hearing through the floor. So, I tend to like either watch a show or do something on the computer, things that are pretty quiet. And it's usually more leisurely. I spent so many years like waking up, getting ready, going to work, and starting to work right away, and really early in the morning, just because that's fit me well with the types of jobs I had. Now I don't want to do that. And so I usually spend at least the first couple hours every day with some kind of media. And it's usually, even if it's educational, it's relaxing. It's not something that I'm actively working or studying. So, and that's every day like that. I guess, projects or, education, I kind of put in the same bucket. It's like some kind of self-improvement. Like learning. Things like that I put together, and that has varied a lot over time. When I think about like when I was doing coding for the first, that kind of 4 or 5 month period, once I got really settled in our new home here, I could have spent some days 6 hours a day, almost like a job, on that stuff because I was really into it and it required long blocks of focused time. Stuff I'm doing now, like with this course, I would say most often it's been around 3 hours a day, usually mostly kind of mid-morning before I get out and do stuff because it's colder now this time of year. I don't feel the urge to get out and go for a hike or a walk really early because it's 40 degrees. So that'll be later now. That'll be after lunch. But I'd say the least predictable part of day is between lunchtime and dinner time, and that changes so much based on what we're up to. Is Lori have as free a schedule as I do, and then we can do something together? Do we have errands to do that are a half an hour away from here, or are we going to spend a whole day like going for a hike? So that, I would say, that blend changes so much. And honestly, it's this kind of idea. I think we talked about this maybe, my gosh, it could be a year ago now. Like, I like having some structure, and then I like having things be not structured after that. And I that has proven to be pretty consistent for me. I don't feel like it's something I intentionally do, but it's something that feels right, at least at this stage. Yeah.
So if you didn't have the job at the winery, you weren't doing this project, Two Sides of Phi.
Yeah.
I mean, are these necessary projects for you, work endeavors? Is that required for you, or could you cut these out? And I'm not asking you to ditch this project right now, but you know what I mean? Like, just the thought experiment is how necessary and needed is this kind of a thing for you?
It's probably way easier for me to think about not doing the 1 day a week wine gig, because that's less passion and more enjoy. And I get tangible financial benefits, right? You get a little bit of spending money, but maybe more importantly, I get good discounts on wine, and it funds a hobby of mine, right? I can go wine tasting with Lori or some friends free of charge, and then I get a discount on the wine that I purchase. So I, honestly, even when it's been really dead and I started to, during the colder time of the year, or, after school goes back and before Thanksgiving, tends to be a quieter time in this industry in a tourist town. And so there have been days where it's really quiet, and I've thought, well, maybe I should stop doing this, because I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it for the engagement with people and for the tangible benefits I just talked about. And it was pretty easy for me to think about stopping doing it. And then, what kept me in it is the things I enjoy about it. And then I would have a day where I was really busy all of a sudden. It reminded me that I like it. So I could absolutely step away from that. Now, when I think about this, that's a harder sell, because, even though it's never, for me, an 8-hour or 9-hour block of time where I have to be on it and doing it, it's still something I look forward to every week. I look forward to these conversations. I look forward to the engagement with the community, and, doing the things that are part of my responsibility set to get the new episodes out. I like that. Sure, there are weeks where, it feels like there are things that are pushing, that are kind of fighting for my time, but not as much lately. That was a year or more ago, and you and I talked about it at the time. So this is a harder idea to step away from. I have had to think about it, because as you and I talked about just a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago now, I was thinking about like, what if I did some kind of wild trip, like some really long through hike that was a few months long or even longer, like, how would I think about this show? And I did find myself able to think about stepping away from the way we do this now, but I did immediately start thinking about, well, what would we do instead? Would we be doing some kind of asynchronous communication, like sending each other stuff and reacting to it, and we still make some kind of show out of it? So obviously I don't want to let it go totally. I think the idea of needing to take a break from it because either you or I had something to do, that feels like a easier sell. Like, we would stop doing it for 4 or 6 weeks for reasons, but then we would be back to it. Like, that feels easy.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? I mean, it's different for you. You're obviously you have a full-time job, and that has to compete with this sometimes. But I don't know. How do you think about it? Is it different?
Yeah. I mean, I think about it as it's a project of mine, and there's a legacy component to it, and I like that, because I always like these projects that are kind of long term, that you can watch them march along over a period of time, and you can see change happening. And at some point we'll be able to look back at episode 1 and kind of laugh about it, you and I, and see how much younger and thinner we were, or whatever. We're not wearing glasses. I don't know. Right. I always like things like that kind of mark points in time. And so it's really appealing in that respect. It does compete a lot for time, because it does take a lot of time to edit and, put the show together. But I found myself getting some intangibles out of it that I didn't really expect. And I wonder how much of that I would carry with me into, you know, an RE space. I want it to be useful. And I think part of the utility of this is looking at it through two different lenses, you know, and, you know, you've made it through the goalposts. And so I think it's interesting. The show changes fundamentally when we both reach that point. And so you know, it has to change in some way. And I also look forward to all the different projects that, you know, I'm starting to think a little bit differently about how I arrange my professional life.
Yeah.
And the projects that I'm a very project-based person. So I need to have these distinct projects that I'm working on and thinking about, and that excites me. So this could be one of those projects. It could also be something else. And, I don't know. I'm kind of excited by that, but it made me ask you the question because you know, people don't put out a lot of content about what it's like after they get into the RE space.
No, they don't.
And I feel like I'm like you in the sense that like I can dive deep on something and then just, okay, I'm done with that, and then move on, you know. Next. And the menu is so large when you get into RE, that, you know, it's interesting to think about what fixed commitments you'd actually make, because I know you're very protective of your time, and this is a fixed commitment. Working a job, even though it's one afternoon, it's a fixed commitment. You build your week around fixed commitments. Yep. And sounds like it's negotiable for you. It's not required.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that is correct. Don't get me wrong. I think it's only better if, you know, we had ultimate flexibility on when we would record, right? Because right now, you know, we do use a fixed day and usually fixed time, unless there's a very specific reason, like a guest or something that can't record at that time. But we stick to this. And so, you know, sure, if you know, kind of the thought question, if it's like, well, we have way more flexibility and, you know, that we could just do it on whatever day each of us kind of, you know, what our schedule dictated that week. Well, that would only be better. I don't view it as too big of a constraint right now, because usually it's not an issue, but there's been times where Lori and I looked at our schedules and it was like, oh, maybe we should go backpacking, like just on a whim next week. We were thinking about this last week, and I was like, yeah, but you know, Tuesday and Wednesday's not good. So like maybe we do it another time. And you know, it's interesting to think about that now, because we don't have very many of those things. You know, I have my Friday commitment. Yep. Lori has a couple of volunteering commitments, and hers are a little more movable than mine, but not super movable. And so we do still run into this sometimes of, you know, life gets in the way, even if it's things we want. So sure, it's only better if it's totally flexible, but that's also not terribly realistic.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. All right, Jay, it was great catching up and seeing where you're at right now. We got the full spectrum of how much time you spend rebalancing on finance. I mean, I'm a little surprised. You said you weren't spending much time on finances, but I guess this is one of your 2 check-ins per year. So I guess I'll let it pass this time. But yeah, it's good getting caught up on you. We had a couple of episodes there where we were talking a lot about me, so I thought it was good to check in with your situation. Sounds like your fire plans aren't failing yet. We'll keep checking in.
Yeah, check in 20 years and see if the money's run out. So far, so good.
You have nowhere to go but more gray.
Yeah, it'll all be white before long. That'll be nice.
Yeah.